So, a single Supreme Court ruling just completely redrew the map for presidential power in America. Today, we're going to break down how a unanimous decision created a legal earthquake, what that really means for accountability, and why the aftershocks are only just beginning. Okay, so picture this. It's 4:47 in the afternoon, and suddenly, inside Donald Trump's entire legal operation, everything just goes silent. No counterattack, no immediate press release, just nothing. Our sources tell us this wasn't some calculated pause. Nope, this was the sound of a team realizing the very ground beneath their feet had just vanished. So what on earth could do that, right? What could possibly stop a machine that's famous for being so aggressive, just dead in its tracks? Well, the answer lies in a decision from the highest court in the land. The cause was a unanimous ruling from the Supreme Court. And look, this wasn't just losing on some minor legal point. No, this was the total teardown of a defense strategy they'd been building for years. A truly decisive, and for them, I'm sure, a shocking moment. Think about it. There are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. And in this case, all 9 of them, every single one, voted the same way. Now, for a case this huge, that kind of total agreement it's incredibly rare. And that brings us to this number, 0. That's how many justices wrote a dissenting opinion, not one. Nobody tried to carve out an exception or signal they were even a little bit uncomfortable with the decision. The court spoke with one single, unified voice, and that's final. And what makes that unanimity so significant is who was actually on that bench. We're talking the Chief Justice, the Associate Justices, and yeah, that includes the 3 justices appointed by Donald Trump himself, the very judges that a lot of people probably thought would be a firewall. They joined right in with the rest of the court. It was a huge signal that the legal arguments themselves had just completely failed. So what the court did here was establish a really powerful new principle. It drew a bright, clear line where before there was kind of this gray area. They made it absolutely clear. If a president's actions are alleged to be for personal gain or unlawful, then the office of the presidency offers 0 protection from criminal accountability. Which brings us to why this ruling was so, well, devastating for the defense. You see, it didn't just poke a hole in their strategy, it brought the entire structure down. The whole thing wasn't really a fortress at all. It was more like a fortress made of cards. Yeah, as one source put it, this wasn't just some legal setback. This was an existential shock. The very foundation of their strategy, which they'd been building for years on this idea of absolute immunity, it was just gone. You know, this whole collapse really came down to a series of strategic choices. First, an appeals court shot down the absolute immunity claim, so the team escalated it to the Supreme Court, probably betting that the delay alone would be their best protection. But instead, by forcing the issue, they basically invited the court to issue this massive, comprehensive ruling that just completely wiped that shield off the board. And this really gets to the heart of how fragile their whole strategy was. It wasn't some solid, impenetrable fortress. It was, as the source said, a stack, where every piece is just balancing on the one below it. And once you pull out that bottom piece, the immunity claim, the whole thing just comes crashing down. Okay, so what happens now? The ruling didn't just end one legal argument. Oh no, it kicked off a cascade effect, a legal chain reaction that's now spreading across every single pending case, setting all these interconnected consequences into motion. It's created this powerful feedback loop. Let's break it down. First, the immunity argument is gone. Poof. That means trial schedules that were totally frozen can now speed up. And that, in turn, means that other civil cases can start moving forward with their collection efforts. All of this just compounds the financial pressure, making everything way more expensive right when resources are getting tighter. And this creates a massive contradiction, a real strategic trap. To fight on the political front, you have to speak freely, you have to control the narrative. But to survive on the legal front, you have to be incredibly careful with your words, you have to operate defensively. And right now, those 2 things are in a head-on collision. The ruling also vaporized some really key but intangible assets. Time, for instance. Time used to be the defense's best friend. Now, with all those trial clocks ticking again, it's their worst enemy. Any leverage they might have had in negotiations, that's seriously diminished. And any hope that maybe the system would just hesitate or get bogged down in delays, yeah, that's pretty much gone now. So let's zoom out to the biggest picture here, because this case is about way more than just one person. It's really about redrawing the boundaries of the presidency itself. It's setting a whole new precedent for what accountability looks like in America. And what's so crucial to understand is that the court's language was very deliberate. It was forward-looking. They wrote it to close a potential loophole in our constitutional system for any president in the future. The message is simple. The Oval Office is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. So, as the legal system grinds forward, we can really see three possible paths emerging. The first is accountability. That's where the system proves it works, which would be a stabilizing force. The second is failure, where the whole thing just stalls out, which would erode public trust. And the third is what you could call fragmentation, where you get different courts coming to different conclusions, and that would be really destabilizing. And that leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. The system isn't just reacting to power anymore, it's actively trying to move around it, to process these huge challenges. So the real test isn't trying to predict exactly what's going to happen. No, the real test is the process itself. Can the basic nuts and bolts of the law, the deadlines, the hearings, the compliance, actually function under this kind of extreme pressure? The question really isn't what might happen anymore, it's whether the system itself will hold.